Morning, everyone that's joined us. Anyway, we're going to be starting our webinar, Mentoring What Could It Do For Me? And we've got 12 people on and probably have a few more people join us as we go. But the good news is that we'll be recording this session so it can be viewed again in case there's anybody else in your organisation or people that you speak to. So let's start with some introductions. My name is Mel. I work for Big Society Capital in the social sector engagement team. And I'm really pleased to have with us a panel of experts. We like to call you our expert panel here for Friday. And what we really aim to do with these sessions is to hear from people who have been through this programme, rather than talking, I suppose, theoretically about what it might be like. And one of the things that people told us at the end of the first year was they really wanted to hear more reflection on the impact and how things have worked. So let's hand over and first of all do some introductions. As I say, Barbra Mazur is here from Battersea Power Station Foundation. Welcome. And she's going to share her experience of being a mentee. We've got Paul Silvester from Foresight in Lincolnshire. He's going to share his perspective of being a mentor. Good morning. And I was just saying to Paul, one of the things that's quite unusual is the profile of investors and consultants and people that we have. We don't have lots of social entrepreneurs who are mentors, so great to have Paul's insight on board. And last but by no means least, we're going to hear from Emma Patmore. There might be people on the line who've maybe had emails from Emma but never actually seen her in the flesh. So she's going to talk about her experience of working on both sides, doing the matches, and the sorts of questions, queries that she receives. So before we do that, I'm just going to talk you through a couple of slides, if I can make it work. Okay, so we're going to talk very much about one of the things that I want to let you know is alongside today's webinar, we also have some video resources so that you can hear again why it worked for organisations like Kate Stewart and We Make Places. It was really good. I met Kate at one of our Let's Talk Good Finance events in Liverpool, and hearing her insight on why having a mentor for her board would have been really, really valuable was, I think, something that was quite fundamental to creating the campaign, Get Informed. She talked about the fact that in many ways, as the CEO of KIC, her board probably relied on her too much, actually, and didn't perhaps ask her some of those really exacting questions that she expected when you're talking about taking on repayable finance. And one of the things that We Make Places done is they've actually gone out and recruited a board member who had these skills so they could really feel like they were prepared. And I know for a lot of social enterprises who have non-executive directors and charities who have trustees who aren't paid, I happen to sit in both of those positions myself, getting hold of this new knowledge, getting comfortable with this new type of risk is quite time consuming. And also, again, I think there is this barrier sometimes around why you've joined to become a trustee. And is getting comfortable with this risk, the balance of risk, something that you think is right for your organisation? So it's probably worth saying that when we created Get Informed, we were very specific about that this is not a sales campaign. This is not about selling social investment to charity boards, to trustees, or to executive teams. It is about being able to give you access to have enough information to make informed decisions about whether exploring social investment is right for you. We've got a great quote actually from some of our other Get Informed resources, where one of our faces of our campaign says that boards are actually probably not doing all of the job they should be doing if they don't have enough information to even consider it, because it could be one of the tools to create impact. And that's always a good thing, I think, to remember. That came from our face, rose from scope. Okay, so we've put on the slides that you can see, and I'm not going to read all of these verbatim, but lots of the learning that we've got about what mentees have said about how useful and positive the experience has been. We have actually got some of the mentors that have gone on to actually take on investment. We've also got some mentees that have gone on to say, look, we've explored this and it's not right for us. And that's also a good outcome from the campaign. We've also have lots of feedback from our mentees, and probably unsurprisingly, because this happens with most mentoring schemes, that you ask the mentors to give up their time for free, and because they want to give something back, which was the title of yesterday's webinar. But we often find that the value of becoming a mentor, if you like, the value to the mentor is much more than they perhaps anticipated. And we have lots of mentors who've said how enjoyable, humbling, interesting, I suppose mind expanding, also appreciation of the challenges on the other side of the fence, particularly if they're, say, professional advisors or investors. And I think it would be fair to say that our mentoring-mentee relationships, some have been very short relationships where they've just had perhaps a one-on-one conversation and decided that they can always come back for more reference in the future. We've had some that have gone well beyond the 6 months that we ask for in terms of commitment, and I'm sure some of those will be the kinds of relationships and networks that will exist for many years to come. We've also had some, I heard, again, some anecdotal stuff this morning, that one of the ones that we thought was probably too big for this kind of organisation, so keep your eyes peeled for maybe a social enterprise airline coming soon, might well actually come about. And so I have to update Emma more later. Okay, so let's hand over. I've explained who the panel are. I'm going to hand over first of all to Barbara, and she's going to spend about 10 minutes talking about her perspective.
Thank you. And my name is Barbara. I'm the director of the Battersea Power Station Foundation, and we are a grant-making organization which funds in 2 boroughs in London. And we have been running for about 3 years, and so we started to explore social investment as part of our overall grant-making strategy. And so we've been dipping our toe into the water with a few investments, but like what you were saying, we didn't have, I'm by no means an expert in social investment. I have done it previously in other trusts and foundations I work for, but I've never led that experience. And my board doesn't have direct experience of social investment either. So when I was actually on maternity leave, my maternity cover had seen the Get Informed campaign, and he applied on our behalf. I mean, he talked to me about it, making sure that I would be okay when I came back. And I said, yes, very much so. I thought we could really benefit from someone who understands the market, in particular a place-based approach, because that's what we're taking. And we were matched with Mark, whose experience both on a local but also national and international level seemed like the perfect fit for us. In terms of what I hope to get from the experience, well, for the foundation, it's about looking at new ways of funding in the 2 boroughs, about the most and how we can go about helping and fixing the most pressing problems there. And it's introducing us to potential partners and collaborators. And I think that for us is really important, because we know a lot about what's happening and the organizations that are doing work on the ground, supporting beneficiaries, but not necessarily individuals who are in the social investment space, and that's what we needed support with. And in terms of me, it was about someone I could bounce ideas off of, learn from, brainstorm with, develop ideas, as well as he could challenge me on those ideas, and I think it's really important about that. He also doesn't speak in jargon, so allows me to understand social investment in a way that I can then take that to my board and explain it to them without using jargon. I think that's very important. And also, I like the fact that he would give me ideas, I'd go away and look them up and say, well, and I'd then ask him questions about it and say, well, do you think this is appropriate for us? If not, it has been a slow burn process, actually. In the beginning, I didn't really know what social investment for us was going to look like, so I would contact him occasionally. He would get back to me, but we are definitely one of those mentor-mentee relationships that's going past the 6 months, partly because I didn't realize how he could be most useful to me, but now as we're developing our new strategy where social investment is going to take more of a feature in how we're going forward, I now know how and how best to use him. So I think for us, unlike many of the mentor programs I've been on where it's been a quarterly, where I met the person quarterly and so forth, I like the fact with Get Informed that it was very much based on what my needs were. And then he very much worked around that. and supported me on that. In terms of how the experience has been valuable for the foundation, I think through the Get Informed program, we've been able to be matched with this amazing financial investment expert who has talked us through options for our current priorities, and indeed is it very much informing our future priorities, which has been fantastic. And for me, it's about building my self-confidence, offering me new ideas, enabling me to test those ideas to see if they're viable, and giving me feedback so I can put that forward to trustees. And actually, one of the things I'm hoping to do, which I've talked to my trustees about, is getting them to meet him, because I think it's also important now that we're at a stage in our development as a foundation, and also they've heard about him, that they now meet him. And then in terms of the one key experience, one thing from this experience I would take away, it's very much that it's been helpful. It's been helpful in terms of increasing social investment in our own portfolio and our own thinking as we move forward. And I think we always knew that social investment would play a part, but he's really kind of opened my eyes more, and trustees' eyes more, to how it can play a bigger role in our portfolio of grant making. So I think overall it's been a fantastic experience.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things there. I've picked out some of those things that you've talked about in terms of having somebody to challenge you, having somebody with an independent perspective. I think having somebody as a knowledge resource. We're very clear that this mentoring is not export professional paid for support, that you can't, you know, if I was a lawyer, I'd be doing all the disclaimers at this particular moment in time. So, you know, we're very clear about what it is and what it isn't. But I think, as you say, one of the benefits of this type of mentoring is it can become very personalised. I'm sure Emma will talk a little bit about when we're actually doing the matching, how we think about, you know, what skills people have, and sometimes how we've even gone out and found a mentor. Maybe we don't have one in the bank that's right, but maybe we know somebody. So there is an element of that. And that piece around building confidence and ideas. And I know this has again been a recurring theme, that mentees feel reassured when you're not in a transactional relationship. So you feel that there's nothing to be gained by somebody trying to skew you one way or the other, because it's not dependent on a consultancy payment or whatever those things are. And I've also known, we've had some people that have been in a consultancy process and still valued being able to just have that independent perspective. So thank you very much for that. That's great. And I'm sure, I didn't say before, but if you have any questions as we go along, please do pop them in the Q&A and we'll come back to those at the end. I encourage you to write them as you think of them, and then you won't forget, and also we'll have a record at the end, so we'll definitely come back to those. So should we go over to you now, Paul?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Silvester. I'm Chief Exec of a charity in North East Lincolnshire called Foresight. And why did I get involved? Well, as an organisation, Foresight have used social investment really to drive our growth. I've worked for the organisation for 15 years. I was the first employee. About 10 years ago, we got involved with Future Builders, and that's allowed us to develop sustainable income stream, which has been huge for our organisation. And I believe that I just wanted to share that experience with other organisations, because my own belief was that if you wish to grow and you wish to develop new income streams, grant money is not there anymore. So it's absolutely essential to find a way of financing that growth. And so I think social investment is the answer. And what I offered? Well, we've been working in the social investment field as our organisation now for 10 years. So I felt I had a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge with regard to social investment. And when we first took on social investment, the hardest part for me as an individual was to convince our board of trustees to take on social investment. So I guess what I could offer was, I've done that now, and that I've changed the way my board of trustees think. So if I could do that for other organisations, I felt that would be very valuable, and it would be just great to be involved doing that. Social investment, actually using that as a tool for growth, excites me. That's probably why I do get involved. And I work with an organisation in Gateshead CAB, and they were actually, through their core work, they realised that there was a real need for finding housing for vulnerable people. but obviously what they needed to do was set up a separate trading arm and take on investment to do that. And they really weren't sure if that was the right thing or how to go about it. And so their journey really was from having an idea to actually moving forward to deciding whether they should or shouldn't take investment. And I think what the key was when I did that, I went, visited them, and I did a presentation about the impact social investment had on my own organisation. But it wasn't just one individual. I actually got the whole board of trustees involved. And I think that was and senior staff. And I think that was quite important, because it's easier when you're talking to the whole board, because they can ask you their questions and their issues around taking on social investment. And I know now that they are actually in the process of seeking investment, which is absolutely fantastic. One thing I learned from the experience, I think they learned that if you want to grow, you can't do it through grants. And I've said this. I think they also learned that you need to think outside the box as well. You know, everything's not black and white. You've got to go for the investment that suits your organisation. You've got to be sure you can repay that investment as well. So, and one of the things that we've learned as an organisation is that, and we always work this way, if we're going to take an investment to develop a service or develop a new model, that has to stack up on its own right and repay the investment. So we don't put any other part of our organisation at risk by taking that investment. And I think that's a valuable lesson to anybody. One thing I gained from the experience, it was an eye-opener for me, because I seem to think every other organisation would work like mine, and everybody would be like me and just want to grab an idea and run with it. And there's a lot people who have a lot more trepidation. And one of the other positives was that I actually invited the whole board of trustees to visit my organisation, and they came down and visited and spent the day with me, and I showed them the different things we'd achieved through social investment. And I think that was probably the one thing that actually changed their minds more than anything else. And to be in a position where we can do that, and I think that's different, because I actually do work for a charity, and I can actually show how positive social investment's been. I think that's been one of the real positives, and that's why it's been easier for me as a mentor, because I've actually got real experience.
Fantastic, thank you, Paul. So again, I've written down for you I think there is something about that credibility of sharing peer experience. So we do lots of other types of events and webinars, and constantly the bit that everybody likes best is hearing from people who've been there. Hence why we brought you here today to do this webinar. There is that thing I think about going the extra mile. We can't promise that from every mentor, because we set out to our mentors what our minimum expectation is, because what most mentors will say to us, well, how much time is this going to take, Mel? You know, can I fit this into my day job? And, you know, they need to know that we're not going to be unreasonable. So we like to set that expectation. But we constantly, again, hear stories and feedback from people where it might not even be their mentor, it might be their mentor's network that have helped them access markets or experience or pro bono support from other organisations. And so I think you can also look beyond the individual mentor, because they bring with them a whole network. I think reinforcing as well that, I mean, it's fantastic. We do think about geography when we match people, but we wanted this scheme to be able to stand outside of having people that were close enough. So mentoring can be delivered online using Skype, because you've never met Mark, so that's a really good example, because he's in Scotland a lot of the time. You can do it over phone. So I spent a lot of time with my mentee, was based in Northern Ireland, on the phone. When I go over there, I will definitely go and hopefully get to meet him. And also, you know, there are some face-to-face opportunities as well. So that's really important. I think the whole piece here around Get Informed is all about it's another strand to underpinning sustainability. So we are not saying that social investment will give you sustainability, that it's a done deal in the same way that grants won't necessarily do that. What we're saying is we often liken social investment to being a tool in the toolbox, and it's about deciding when that's the right tool. If you are going to if you have an idea and that idea clearly stacks up, so particularly around property investment and things like that, then often social investment might be the better tool than maybe grant, and it's certainly in Paul's experience.
I think as well, it's good that you go in without any knowledge of the organisation you're going to work with, so you don't. So I think that's the good thing about not having been too close, because you don't know the demographics of the area and you don't know how the organisation works. And I think the finding out of that is quite an important part of the journey, because you can influence that with the board.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that change in mindset, which you very, very clearly explained there, and I know that we have another one of our faces of our campaign, Preston Road Women's Centre, and Lisa Hilter, who would tell a very similar story to 10 years ago. Her board just could not get their heads around, taking on debt. And she said it was really, really challenging. They lost a lot of board members, but in the long term, it's been for them a defining change.
It's funny because my organisation is it's just formed a partnership with Preston Road Women's Centre.
Great. No.
We're just going to work. We're doing some investment around homes for vulnerable people across Yorkshire and Norfolk. So, an organisation called Estuary Homes.
So you heard it here first. So that's really good. Another tie-up that we like to see. And then I think the final point that I would make before I hand over to Emma is around the education piece. So as well as mentees receiving education, knowledge, and experience, that piece around education for mentors, and we have that in twofold. So we have it around the softer skills, as in it was interesting, it was enlightening, it was rewarding in terms of volunteering your time, but also that very healthy reminder, which is certainly not a bad thing for many social investors. That's why social investors have some of their individuals have come forward and volunteered to be mentors or consultants to understand what it's like in the real world. It's that healthy reminder that was you 10 years ago or a long time hence, and as you say, not organisations the same. There's been quite an interesting piece of feedback. I'm very honest, it's not all positive, but some of these we've heard from people have been things like it's actually very difficult. Mentees sign up, but they perhaps don't appreciate the time they've got to carve out to get the most out of this. We've got a question.
Yes, Oscar Alvarez. He asks, in your experience, how demanding has the mentorship program been in terms of hours, for example, monthly? We've got a couple of questions that we'll start.
Okay, we'll start with that one. Let's do that one, and we'll hold the others and come back to. So, in terms of mentorship, we set a minimum, but how on just in your experience from yours, how much time do you think you dedicated to it?
Actually, it's quite positive for me, because I prefer to visit face to face, and it's as today. When I'm travelling on the train, I can work and do a significant amount of work without anybody coming in knocking on my office door or bothering me. So I've probably benefited by actually doing that.
Yeah.
By going, visiting, etc. Because
Yeah. So I mean, that's the other thing, there's that flexibility. What about you, Barbara, in terms of about how much time, was there a set pattern? I know you said Mark worked around you, but if you had to equate that over, say, the first 6 months, was it an hour a week? Was it 4 hours a month? Or how would you have any sort of sense of what that looked like?
Well, I'm a firm believer that you get what you put into it. So I always did homework ahead of time. So I guess it's how long is a piece of string, but depending on what I needed. But I'd say, hour, 2 hours, sometimes a bit more, depending on the complex nature of what I was needing from him. And then he and I would have a conversation, and then both of us usually had some homework to go away and follow up. And I guess that also depended on what that homework was. Sometimes it was him just sending me some links or sending an email to introduce me to someone. So that 10 minutes maybe to formulate an email, send it to everybody and make the introductions. And then sometimes it's been a bit more. So now as we are ramping up our interest in social investment, I am asking him a bit more from him, because I have very specific questions I'm wanting to get from, answers from. And that maybe, I mean, it's not all the time. So when I am talking to him, I'd say, on my side, maybe 1 or 2 hours, and then from him, maybe the same. But we are very ad hoc.
Okay.
So
I think that's one of the beauties of this program, is that we didn't. Yes, I'll come back to Jeff definitely. For is that we didn't set you have to meet face to face for 4 hours, 4 times in the. What we said is it won't take more than an hour every 2 weeks. That's the minimum check-in, but that could be, as you say, by email. I know that happened with me. Paul,
one of the things I said, and I think that was quite important to developing the relationship, was anytime something crops up or you've got an idea, just pick up the phone and ring me. It doesn't have to. We don't have to have set appointments. And if I'm not available, I'll ring you back as soon as I am. And I think that helped to develop our relationship, and it put it on quite a good footing from the very word go.
Right. So again, I think you'll find that what you have to do to some extent is to work out with your mentor what kind of communication and frequency will work for both of you. Actually, this is probably a really good point to go over to Emma, and Emma can talk through her bit, and also perhaps what happens when, I'm sure you'll cover as well what happens when things don't go right. We've had to do some rematching, and sometimes you don't always get that fit right, and sometimes the relationship doesn't work. But do you want to start off and tell us a little bit about your experience of working with us, Emma?
Yes, morning everybody. I have to say, I don't know, and anyone who knows me well will be very surprised by what I'm about to say, but I don't actually think I've got too much to say based on what Barbara and Paul have already said, and my furiously scribbled notes about things that I wanted to say. Because unrehearsed, they both said what I believed was going to be the case in terms of what both parties have got out of it. Broadly, Get Informed is another example of how the sector isn't prepared to take things lying down, and because people feel very passionately about whatever their particular cause and mission is, and it needs no explaining about the fact that funding is so very stretched. But so what else then can we do to make a difference to this particular section of society? People talk about giving something back, but what does that mean? Certainly people's time and experience and advice, and Paul again expertly demonstrated that by saying, well come and visit us, see things in action, and very much, if people buy from people about most things. So I think that was an incredibly generous thing to do, and people giving up their time for free. But as Mel alluded to earlier as well, the mentors have been incredibly enthusiastic about doing that, and not just because I know so much about it, but some of the time we've experienced how, well, actually, just having an extension to your overdraft might help the organisation out in this first instance. But going back to Mel's point about when things haven't quite worked out, incredibly frustrating, not because people have, engaged in it half-heartedly or anything like that. Sometimes it has been time commitments, or someone's annoyingly landed that promotion at work that they've been after, so that's changed things for them. So the mentees, very keen, of course, to get on, and so we make assuredity that we'll find the next person for them that can still offer the same level of engagement and support, and through their experience. Broadly, from my perspective, as well as people's experience in specific areas of social finance, I've also looked more broadly, certainly geography, as much as possible, and whilst that's not been a hindrance to this, as Mel explained earlier, very helpful, of course. So if you are able to go around the corner, or into the next county, just to have a face-to-face and meet with the trustees can be incredibly helpful. But I've also tried to look at, well, this particular mentor, he is also a trustee at a similar organisation. So there's a different level of understanding there about what it is that this organisation is trying to do. And so, just trying to think about things a bit more laterally, as well as literally. But again, and as Paul alluded to before, offering that new objectivity, because the trustees and the chief exec, they care so very passionately about what it is that they do, and that's absolutely a good thing. And you do have to weigh up all the potential risks of taking on social investment. But for someone that is less familiar with something, but can still cross-reference against what they've done previously, I still think can offer quite a lot in this instance. People have just been, again, just so incredibly grateful for the fact that someone is going to give up their time and come and advise them. And it's been so heartening as well, I think, that the mentors are absolutely getting something out of this as well. I mean, pretty much like being a trustee, who in the majority of times give up their time and expertise for nothing, for free as well. But it's because they really feel that because of that experience that they have, it could really make a difference. And it's okay for the trustees or the mentors to get that warm, fluffy feeling inside as well, because otherwise, why would you do it? So it's it's been enlightening, and I say that because my day-to-day work for Trustees Unlimited and doing the matches for people who want to actually be trustees for a particular organisation, very busy lives often, busy jobs, lots of other commitments, but still want to get involved for all the right reasons, and the same is true for the Getting Forward campaign. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to be involved so far, and looking forward to when we all get to hang out flags about Barbara's landing that big fat check from someone to move their particular projects on. So, but sincerely, I'm not trying to be glib. Sincerely, it is just another way of the innovation for the sector, thinking about other ways to make a difference ultimately to so many other people.
I mean, as I said, I'm a social entrepreneur. I'm not a social investor. And for me, it's not about the money. It's about the impact that the money creates. And that's the only reason that we would want to spend any time trying to help people understand it. I also think there was a lot of early myth around social investment, that it would solve everybody's issues, which it won't. But it is about understanding, as I said before, when it might be the right instrument, the right tool to help you do those things. And I think we think probably underutilized because it's misunderstood or not understood. And this is one of the ways that we can help to do that. Just before we go to Q&A, I'm going to do that next. I'm going to rely on Luna to do some, because unless I come and sit where you are, you won't be able to see, that text is so tiny. Just wanted to talk about, I suppose, the capacity for us to be able to match people. So for those of you that are interested probably to hear more about other mentors' experiences, we will soon have the video up from yesterday's webinar, so you'll be able to hear Mark's view, and Danielle Level-Jones was on the call, and we also had Isabel Gregory. We had Isabel as well, so we had three great experiences yesterday that can share it again, all from sort of different backgrounds. But one of the things that we've been able to do, Emma, is when we've looked at matching, we encourage mentors to come forward and mentees to come forward, so that we've always got some in the pot that we can hopefully do some matching. But sometimes somebody's come to us, we ask you to fill in a very brief, it is quite a brief background. We think actually we know an ideal person in our network who hasn't volunteered yet to be a mentor, but hopefully the power that Big Society Capital and all of our partners, including Trustees Unlimited, Reach, the Honorary Treasurers Forum, CAS Business School, and the Association of Chairs. Have I missed anybody?
I think that's
not. The Charity Commission, yes. And the I very dearly did. The Charity Commission. If we feel that there is somebody in our network that could be a really good mentor, we're quite unashamed about going up and tapping them on the shoulder and saying, would you like to become a mentor? So part of these 2 sessions, one is to encourage more mentors to register, and the other one is to try and get more mentees to come forward. We've matched around 100 so far. We have a nominal target in our head of at least doing 150. So yeah, we'd like some more people to come forward. So let's go and see from our participants. We've got some questions, and I'm hoping that Luna can read a couple of the questions and I can pose them.
A second question from Oscar. Could you please comment about your views on the value emerging from the network being created by the mentorship program? He says that he imagines the frequent interaction between mentors and mentees, but also the broader group of people who are involved in the organisation of the program might be creating a sort of new emerging community. How do you see that indirect impact reinforcing the broader ecosystem around big society capital?
Oh, right. So it's a very good question. Shall I have a go at that one? So this is really aimed at us. Okay. So actually, it's very insightful, Oscar, and quite a few things that we need to address there. So some of them we're working on actively. Some of them we perhaps heard early on and didn't act quickly enough on, and we're trying to do something about those. And then there's also what happens next. So let me take those things in order. So right at the very beginning, when we did some of the user research around how this would work, people told us that having a community of mentors to talk to mentors, to say, I've got this question from my mentee, does anybody else know, would be helpful. If I'm honest, I think we got ourselves a little bit tied up in knots about not straying into professional advice, even though we are clear that that's what this isn't. But we've decided to rectify that, and we will be creating some LinkedIn closed groups, forums, so that we can have people join, so that hopefully people can ask those questions of the rest of the networks. We did try some face-to-face morning breakfast nexus, because our mentors are so spread around the whole of the country, and predominantly those networking sessions happen in London. Sorry, you'll guess from this that I'm not a Londoner, so I don't live here, and you know, it just isn't viable, really. You tend to get the same people that come. So what we want to try and do is create some of those virtual networks. However, we are going to be doing something the first week in December. So again, this is a sort of a pre-announcement. Hold dates in your diary. The first week in December, starting on the 3rd of December, is UK Charity Week, and we've decided to take our Get Informed programme on the road. So we're going to be doing events in Bristol, in Wolverhampton, in Liverpool, in Sheffield, and hopefully in Suffolk. And the idea would be to invite trustees from around those places to come to those meetings, and of course to invite mentors and mentees and some of the faces of our campaign along with our partners. So I'm hoping that's one of the ways that we can do it, Oscar. I think the other thing that we're thinking about is, what's the legacy for Get Informed? When I came to Big Society Capital 3 years ago, one of the things that I struggle with a little bit is, as a wholesale investor, how do we become relevant to social enterprises and charities around the country? So, you know, if you are the CAB in Gateshead, you know, there's this great big London-centric organisation with a lot of £600 million worth of money and more, but we can't lend it directly to social enterprise charities. So we were looking for ways that we could practically support, and one of the things that both organisations like Trustees Unlimited and the Charity Commission, along with social investors, said to us is, trustee boards is a challenge. Deals often fall down late in the day. When the exec team have done the work, they take it to the trustee board, and then the trustee board get cold feet because they just don't feel ready with the information. That was why we created this. Now, we did start it originally, most of our campaigns are time limited, because there's just a few of us. It's probably quite a big organisation, Big Society Capital, but in our team there's Luna and I, and then we have a little bit of a feed in from some of the other team members, Geeta and Katie, and our communications team. But we've been working on this for 2 years, and we've also been talking to Access, the Foundation for Social Investment, along with their Enterprise Development Programme. And what we're trying to scope out now is, what's the future for Get Informed? It's certainly not something any of us would want to walk away from, because it feels like it's adding value. And so that will play to your third point, I think, Oscar, which is, there's a lot of research that we've done around this, user-centred reports. There's a lot of data that we're collecting here around how well these things work, and we're as along with these slides, those are things that we have either published in the past or we are going to be publishing going forward, because we're really interested to share the learning, I suppose, that's come from this. So I think in summary, some of them we haven't done as well as we could, some of them we're getting better at as we go, and a lot of them we're still a work in progress. That would be my summary.
So we've got a question from Jeremy. What was the Future Builders comment that helped propel Mark's business? Is it part of the programme you offer?
No, Future Builders is a historic programme now. Paul, I don't know whether you want to say more about it, but we can cover it, but I wouldn't want to get your hopes up because it isn't available now.
Well, Future Builders is what probably the central government's first foray into lending money.
Yes.
We're talking 10 years, 11 years ago now. The programme's finished, but I have to say that programme it was a mix of loan, and there was a grant element to that, which was used to build your capacity of your organisation. I think that's why it's called Future Builders.
Yes.
And for us, the grant element was probably just as important, because it allowed us to bring consultants of our choice to really develop our financial standing, the way we looked after our money, our way we administrated things, and probably that was the real foundation for our growth.
Okay.
And I will say that I went around the country doing some talks for the forerunner, which was the Social Enterprise Investment Fund.
Yes.
And at that time, when people realised it was a part loan, the room used to empty.
Yes.
and I think that's the mindset we need to change, really, because I'm quite passionate that you want to grow your organisation. Grants are not available, so if you've got a good business proposition, social, and I'll give you what we do when we're looking for an investor. We actually have a competition because the market's huge. So there's lots of people who want to lend and very few people want to borrow. So the borrower's a strong person. So we actually have a competition. We get the best interest rate possible. We actually get people competing against each other. So I'd always recommend that to anybody who's looking to take
top tip. Took the words right out of my mouth. Negotiate. That's yeah. Even with investors, that's definitely. I think what that does do, though, I'll pick up that point about, yes, Future Builders is a historic program. It was one of those first forays into social investment, but this product of what we would now see as blended finance, so part grant and part loan, still exists. It's one of the major themes from the Access Foundation that has some big society capital money and some lottery money, and you'd see that in the Growth Fund. We have had programs like Big Potential, which has offered the sort of capacity building grant, and you still have the Reach Fund that come again from the Access Foundation, that often comes from investors to help people just if they need a little bit more work and development to become ready to take on the investment, and they can access that through Reach. And Access have just announced a new programme in the last week around enterprise development, so that's definitely worth checking out as well.
Jeremy also wants to say that as he understands it, the social investment is a loan rather than an exchange of investment for equity.
Okay. Does anybody want to try that one, or do you want me to?
Your area of expertise.
Okay. So social investment can be either. It can be debt or it can be equity, but that very much depends on your governance structure. I think we just need to make sure that we're using the word equity in the same way. So equity in a financial term is shares. So you can only do that if you are a community interest company limited by share, or you are a community benefit society, or a regulated society, which is the old industrial and providence society. It is only those types of organisation that could effectively give away capital in the form of shares. I often get you to think about this in the, I'm a simple girl, you know, it's like Dragon's Den, basically. I will give you X for X amount of your company. But the vast majority of social enterprises and charities are limited by guarantee, or the charities, and they don't have any shares or equity to give away. And that's where social investment in that case becomes a straightforward loan. and it's debt that you're taking on. So they are lending you money on the premise that they will get it back when you've traded with interest. Now, the sort of really important definition between those two things, because we often get this when we get to questions about, I get lots of questions about interest rates and the cost of capital, is that secured lending is less risky because there's a building or property or something that it is secured upon, that if things go wrong, there is an asset that could be used to help to recover the money that has been lent. Whereas if it is unsecured lending, then that's much higher risk because there isn't any guarantee, and it is just about how good your business plan looks. It is about investing in people. It is always about investing in people. So if we're talking purely financial, equity is when you have a governance structure that has shares, and debt is for all of the other organisations. There's a really good document on good finance, which I'm going to talk a little bit about before we go, that helps you look at all of the different governance structures and all of the social investment instruments that would be relevant depending on what governance structure you have. I do sometimes get people ask this question about social investment in a wider phase, about social capital or social equity, and there is this. It's not an incorrect assumption that it would be nice that social investment was investment in people or space, but actually when we're using the term social investment, we are talking about money that is lent and repaid in full with interest. It is a financial transaction, and it's probably worth saying it's not necessarily soft money. I think people think, well, if we create a lot of social impact, does that mean we won't have to pay all of it back? I'm going to tell you there aren't many social investors that would be up for that one. But what I would say is that social investors are, they really care about the social impact. And so there are many different examples. I've just published a blog from all of our Let's Talk Good Finance that basically says, if things go wrong, tell your investor, because I've known so many social investors who will renegotiate the terms of the loan, give you a capital or an interest repayment holiday. They will sometimes lend you more money if that's what's needed to get over the hump. They will perhaps help you to strengthen your board. Think about your network, because they don't want to have to call the loan in, all right? That's not what a social investor wants. They want to create the social impact.
Is the information from Nick Jenkins still available? Because he said similar things. For those that don't know, Nick Jenkins, aka Mr. Moonpig, we had an event a few years ago where Nick was one of the guest speakers, and he's a very active investor. And even he said in front of the masses, for him, the return, as in getting the cold hard cash back, wasn't his primary motivator, and just advised everyone else in the room to absolutely keep it a two-way conversation, really. The same as you might with your bank, in the truest sense. If you're going to default on your overdraft, don't leave it to the last minute before speaking to your bank manager. Have that upfront and grown-up conversation, because there is always going to be another way to solve the problem. It comes back to I think boards having that confidence to have that kind of conversation, and the confidence in being matched with the right individual, really, that can offer them insights as to how the best investor might be. So it's kind of circles within circles, really, is what I'm trying to say. So making that best match between the organisation and the mentor, who can then say, well, I think one of your possible best ways forward is this, and then building that similar good relationship with the people that are actually lending the money. But as I said before, keeping that conversation open, and discussing early, or as early as possible, when things might be starting to go wrong.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, go on. Sorry. Let's just set up Barbara, and then we'll.
It also depends on who the investor is. Because as a trust and foundation, I know many trust and foundations, and we're looking at this, could turn it into a grant.
Yes.
So I think it is about having the open conversation.
It is.
I think there's two other things you've talked about: unsecured and secured loans. I think it's worth remembering, if it's unsecured, it's generally got 5-year maximum, whereas a secured loan you can probably get 25 years, which is, I think, very important. And I think the other thing is, and I think it's quite important when you're choosing an investor, is you generally get a nominated individual who works as your relationship
Yes.
manager. And I think it's very important you can build that relationship with your relationship manager, so you know that if you've got an issue, you can pick the phone up straight away and talk. And for me, that's it. When we have our competitions to decide who we use, one of the important factors is who's going to be the relationship manager.
Yes.
And how easy is it? Because we've actually taken an investment where we had a fractious relationship, and the quickest thing we did was refinance.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely about relationships, and I think that's another reason why, again, getting to understand not all social investors do the same thing, so they lend in different bits of the market, and I think that's, again, one of the ways that we can talk to you where good finance can play a part. Do we have any other question that we really need to answer? And then we're short on time.
Michael from Project 6 asks about social impact bonds, and David Glassman from the Worshipful Company of Management Consultants, who's been talking to Gita at
Okay.
Big Size Capsule, and he wonders whether in the matching process, therefore in the matching process, about the balance sought between those who have mentoring experience versus those who have social investment experience.
Okay, that's a really good question. So the SIB question, the social impact bond question, if you don't mind, with only 5 minutes left to go, that's probably too big for me to tackle, but I'll get Luna to follow up, and I'm happy to have an offline conversation with you about that, and we can provide some more information. In terms of the balance, that's something we did think about actually at the beginning. So we say for this process, you don't have to have mentoring experience, because we will provide, we've got some resources, we've got do's and don'ts for mentors, we've got top tips, and we've also got a webinar where we ran a training session for mentors at the beginning, so we offer those things up. We will also, if need be, assign another mentor, if you like, to work alongside the mentor if you want a buddy, effectively. What we did insist is that the individual had enough credible experience in social investment to be able to be useful. I think what has been really interesting, though, is that we've often found that the mentoring that goes on is much broader than social investment. But because we did say at the beginning this wasn't a general mentoring scheme, we wanted to make sure that the people we put up were credible. So we generally say that people have to have working knowledge of social investment within the last 24 months. And we do very light due diligence, but yeah, we will check. So I think in simplest terms, it could be your first mentoring relationship. We'll try and give you some support for that. And we're looking for light touch sort of experience around raising finance. So I think we'll just go to summary. I'm just going to hop to, I think we're going to move to the last slides. And I just wanted to tell you about good finance. I think that's, I'm hoping that's what we'll end up back at. Okay, so we've talked a lot about which investors do which things, the difference between secured lending and unsecured lending, or social investment for boards. Yeah, actually, you can put on that one, the resources. So goodfinance.org.uk is a joint project between ourselves, Access, Social Enterprise UK, NCVO, and a range of other partners. And it's a one-stop shop, if you like, to find out more information about who the investors are. It also, very importantly, will tell you about all of these different, what I would call financial instruments or products. I know when I first came to Big Society Capital 3 years ago, it blew my brain when we started talking about bonds and social impact bonds, secured lending, unsecured lending, social investment tax relief, community shares. I mean, you know, we have to remember that for social enterprises, charities, this is just a tiny bit of their job, and we're not expecting everybody needs to become an expert. Jargon is to sit in lots of investment committees and come out thinking there's a lot of Latin used in that. I have no idea what that. So we try really hard, again, because it's based on user-centered design, not to use jargon, and there is a glossary of terms on there. There's also, really importantly, a diagnostic tool. So you can actually put in, I am a charity based in Norfolk, and I'm thinking about taking on a building and the lease for the building, and I want to borrow some money to be able to do that. You can put all that information in, and it will take the very long list of investors and it will shorten them to those that, you know, are probably the best place to start. And we keep that updated all of the time because there are new investors that pop up and funds that finish. So we have to make sure that that's your best source of information. It could also say no, as in we never say social investment is not for you ever, but it might be that at that moment in time, maybe your trading ability is very underdeveloped. Perhaps you've not had chance, and maybe taking on repayable finance just doesn't seem like something that would be right for your organisation. But we always say that's not to say it never will be, because, you know, things change over time. You can also see on here some of the resources for mentors that I talked about are listed on the screen as well. So I think we just pass over to the last slide, and I will just summarise, I suppose, by saying the things that I have got from today is, you know, when you enter into, if you're thinking about joining and asking for a mentor, so for the mentees that are on the line, be clear about what the expectations are from this, and we do set those out. Use the independence of your mentor. So, you know, but you need to have the time to spend. So if you want a mentor, be clear about carving out some time so that you can get the most from it, because it's definitely a two-way process. This is about an exchange of knowledge, so you will have things to give to your mentor as they will have things to give to you. I think we want you to be honest with us, so tell us. If your mentoring relationship's not going well and you don't tell us and you wait to your survey to tell us, that's too late for us to fix things. So please do get back in contact if things aren't going according to plan. Share your experience. So we set up at the beginning that we set the expectations, so you get matched, you have a 2-week check-in, a 4-week check-in, and we send you emails just checking that things are online. And then we do surveys at 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months and 12 months. And we aim to publish and share that learning. But we can only share what you tell us, okay? So please do take the time, I suppose. I know surveys are another survey that lands on your desk, but it's really important if you're part of this scheme so that we can learn from it. I'll summarise and sum up by saying there are other ways that you can find out more about social investment. So, as I said, goodfinance.org.uk. You can come to a Let's Talk Good Finance event, which are run around the country. You can check out Big Society Capital or Good Finance is website for where they are happening near you. But just some highlights, I'm off to Plymouth, Leeds, Salford, in Manchester, and there's more, isn't there? London, Birmingham. Yes, there's lots. Have a look online and see where you can come to those. And I'll also follow up in the notes, as well as the webinar from yesterday that we'll make available. I'll make sure that my most recent blog about the learning that's come from running those Let's Talk Good Finance events, because if I'm honest, it's not my learning, it's the learning of listening to all the Hear from the Peers that have come and told their story, so that many more people can learn. Yeah, be honest, be real, stick your hand up when you're in trouble, expect that it'll take longer than it's going to, all of those things that have come out from the richness of those events. So I think it just leaves finally for me to say thank you to all of our guest panels. I apologise if we can get through everybody's questions. What I'll do is save the questions offline afterwards. If anybody has a burning question that they weren't able to answer today, feel free to get in contact with Luna and myself, and we'll try and reply individually. Thanks very much for your time and for joining our webinar.